book that I resumed reading, I had just kind of cracked the cover on it a while back, and the author's name is James Stenson, and the book is called Father, the Family Protector. And again, I'm just at the front end of it, but it lends a lot to some things we can delve into. Just a little bit about him, the author. He's not a father actually, and he's a schoolmaster and helped to establish a couple of schools, one of which was the one I went to speak to some of the parents in D.C., this Opus Dei school, the Heights, very, very elite school and all, but he was one of the forming members of that school. And what he did in this book was to take an approach similar to, if we're familiar with Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill. He surveyed through his own experience some successful, in his day and age, some successful people in the way of wealth, and what was the common thread amongst them. What are some of the common traits that they had? So what Mr. Stenson did here was he obviously as a schoolmaster dealt with a lot of families, saw those that were pretty much had their act together and doing a good job of parenting and those sorts of things. And so he was going to put down in this book some of those common practices and things that they did. So the layout of the book is taking these traits, and we're going to start off in leadership. And we've heard this before, that we have some practices within the workplace of leadership that tend to be pretty effective. And he goes right on into, just like we've done, and saying, well, if we take some of those practices and apply them in the home, because you can have men that are very effective in the workplace and not so at home. But if we take those and apply them at home, then some good things can happen, and we can be effective leaders and have well-formed children. And in this case, obviously, we know that the leadership does fall on the shoulders of the father. The dad's the head of the home. That's not a privilege, it's a duty. It's something we're supposed to do. We're supposed to take it as our duty, and that is God's design. We're not thrusting ourselves into that position, but God ordained it this way. And we only need to look to the Holy Family, right? Because if the holiest person in the household would be in charge, then the Christ child would have been in charge. Or out of the couple, it would have been our Blessed Mother, but it was Saint Joseph, who still a very holy man and just man, was the head of that family. And why might that be? Just because of human nature, the way God designed us. Relatively speaking, we tend to be less bent on emotion, and so we might not be so sympathetic with our children whenever they misbehave or disobey. Mom might tend to be, or she tends to be more lenient, and so we need to shoulder that responsibility, firm that up for their own good. And why are they made that way? Obviously, so they could be aware and sensitive to their needs, especially as babies, in case of possible illness or something not be quite right. So let's go ahead and see what these practices might be, and I'm gonna roll through them real quickly here, and then there's going to be a few that I'm going to want to dive into or drill down on, if you will. First of all, he says, and these are bullets, so they're not so much numbered, but he says the man puts his wife first, and the children know this. And he goes on to say in that one that this is more than half of the secret to effective fatherhood. Next, he has a spirit of lively collaboration with his wife. They present a united front to the children. Next, a great father works with his wife to maintain a long-term vision, 20 years ahead. The next one, he sees his sacrificial efforts as an investment into his children, not merely a vexing hassle, to receive a later reward, a payback for these sacrifices that he makes. He corrects his children's faults. He's never afraid of being temporarily unpopular. Again, we don't need to be buddies. We don't need to be friends. We just don't need any of that. And we need to see what we're doing in our relation to our children as what we need to do for them to build character into them. He's conscious of his authority. He knows what goes on in the home and inside the growing minds of his children. He teaches them how to use their freedom responsibly. So he's going to teach them that they have freedoms and rights, but how to use it responsibly. He wants his children to be active, doing things, active in life, have an active life that also involves intelligent risk taking. Not hiding, under a bushel basket, but being out there doing things, and even if some, prudent risk is involved. He goes without TV to set a good example. These are all things that this, we've talked about this, and it's good to have another outside party that's observed some things that are very peculiar that he's seeing. It's a bit of an affirmation to some of the things that we propose and recommend. He says a life of leisure. He's willing to put off a life of leisure until his children are grown. And then goes on from. Let me do a few more. He reads a lot. He knows a lot, and so this leads his kids to become readers. He's open to his children's suggestions as to about family decisions, getting their input, and he takes his wife's judgment seriously. And then there's a few others. So